pleasure, Amarnath ji, to be delivering this talk in your presence. I have a very pleasant memory of hosting you at the Keppel Shipyard, I think about 5 years ago, on one of our FPSOs that we were developing for Indonesia. Uh, I think you are part of the delegation, the Honorable Petroleum Minister of the time, and we had some very pleasant. I have some very pleasant memories of hosting you at the Keppel Shipyard here in Singapore. And my profuse thanks to the organizers. I think an event of this kind clearly requires a lot of legwork and a lot of coordination. So kudos to the team that has put together such a fantastic program at such a short notice. Uh, my endeavor today would be to take the audience through a very high level idea of what we at SP Oil and Gas and the SP Group in particular have been able to countenance and put together and also look at in the context of India. Next slide, please. A little bit about our group. I think it goes without saying, and I don't think I'll be exaggerating when I say that we are probably the oldest incorporated business house in the country. Our promoters threw up the group open for business in 1865. So to put that in a context, that was 4 years before the birth of Mahatma Gandhi. And so we have been a part of India's progress since before independence to where the country is today. And if you look at some of the landmark buildings, the skyline of Mumbai, we have done some iconic constructions, such as the both the old and the new Reserve Bank of India building, the Brabant Stadium, Marine Drive, and so on. And today we are present in more than 46 countries and destinations. We have more than 60,000 people who work for us. And very importantly, we have more than 60,000 employees, more than 8,000 engineers who are working for us across locations, both in India and internationally. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the projects that we have executed or are in the process of executing at SP Oil and Gas. We consider ourselves to be among the world leaders in the business of putting complex machinery on floating platforms and using that machinery, those equipment, to produce oil and gas on the high seas. We have two FPSOs, floating production, storage and offloading vessels that are currently in service with ONGC in Mumbai High. The first one was delivered in 2013 and the second one in 2015. On the first FPSO, which is called Armada Sterling, we have created the world record of 100% uptime without incident. And we completed the primary time charter period of 7 years earlier this year, after which we got a 10-year extension in that field at the same location. The third project that you see on the screen is the Carapan Armada Sterling, the third FPSO, which is operating off the coast of Madura Island in Indonesia. This is the world's first FPSO that has the capability to handle 5,000 parts per million of hydrogen sulfide in the incoming gas stream. And this is also the world's first FPSO that is reducing that hydrogen sulfide into 21 tons of sulfur per day and storing that sulfur on board the FPSO in molten condition. There was a lot of talk earlier today in this seminar about carbon sequestration or at least carbon capture technology. So we probably are among the pioneers in this field. On this particular FPSO, we have been capturing a lot of carbon dioxide together with hydrogen sulfide by a very interesting combination of formulated amine that we are using in the amine contactor column on board the FPSO. It's a different matter that the client does not at this stage require us to sequester the carbon dioxide. But if given the opportunity to do so, or if there is a requirement from ONGC, for example, we'll be more than happy to lend our expertise in this direction to our national oil company. The last project that you see on the screen here is Armada Sterling the fifth. This is a project which is bound for Bay of Bengal. This is the project that we are in the process of executing right now at Sembcorp Marine Shipyard here in Singapore. I'm the overall project head for this project. This is India's first VLCC FPSO. the first deep sea FPSO for ONGC. And there are a number of distinct firsts that ONGC and we are charting as a result of this project. Among other things, one very interesting characteristic of this project is that we are using for the very first time anywhere in India low nitrogen dioxide burners in this particular project. We have 81 megawatts of power production capacity installed on board the FPSO, all of which is going to produce very low, that is less than 40 parts per million of nitrogen dioxide and NOx and those sort of emissions. And this is, like I mentioned, being attempted for the very first time in offshore India in the history of ONGC. This is also the first project where we are installing a sulfate removal unit on board the FPSO, which is going to further burnish the environmental credentials of this particular FPSO. Next slide, please. I'm now going to dive into offshore wind. We believe as an organization that given the expertise that we have already gained in the department of putting complex machinery on floating platforms and also fixed platforms by virtue of our group company FCONS on the high seas, this offshore wind segment is a very natural adjacency for us to get into and lend our expertise to valuable clients such as ONGC to see if projects can be developed that will help the likes of ONGC and other national and international oil companies burnish their green credentials and improve their positions on the green league tables. Next slide, please. So what is offshore wind? I think the audience that we have here, we don't probably need to spend a lot of time talking about it, but I guess suffice it would to say that any water body, both inland and offshore, where you can put wind turbines, either in fixed foundation configuration or in floating foundation configuration is what can be termed as offshore wind. There are some very distinct advantages of putting the wind turbines on the high seas or let's say offshore. Some of them obviously are associated with things such as the distance, the availability of land or the lack of it, I would rather say, and the fact that for a lot of people, seeing the wind turbines running in their backyard is a bit of an eyesore. So from a lot of those perspectives, putting the turbines offshore becomes a very natural thing to do, and also you don't have a real estate problem. You can develop, you can extend the field to the extent that you believe you can, without having to worry about getting right of way, negotiating with the villagers, and so on and so forth. And you can truly mount and launch mega utility scale projects in offshore if you really want to go down that path of producing green electricity through this particular route. Now, what are the other advantages of offshore wind? One of the interesting things that we have found out as we have investigated the industry is that the wind quality, which we get on land, is orders of magnitude lower than what we can get in offshore. And if you could push yourself truly to go to deeper offshore, high sea sort of an environment or a situation, then the wind quality improves orders of magnitude. I do not think I'll be exaggerating when I said or when I say that the day is not far off when using a floating wind foundation, one could clock as high as 64 to 66% plant load factor with a wind turbine. And I don't think I need to convince anybody that that is going to be a clincher, because one of the biggest advantages of offshore wind or wind energy in general is that you do not have to spend any money on feedstock. You don't have to worry about where the coal is going to come from. You don't have to worry about where the gas is going to come from, and so on and so forth. The feedstock, that is air, is free. So if you can achieve those kind of PLFs, then you can immediately start talking about a fantastic business case possibilities. Next slide, please. This is how a typical offshore wind turbine plant is going to look like, both in the floating as well as in the fixed configuration. You will have wind turbines rotating, electricity is produced. Usually it's the AC electricity, and depending upon the distance of the installation from the shore, you may choose to go with the conversion of the AC electricity into DC electricity and then stepping it up and sending it onshore. DC, it appears, is significantly better than AC in terms of the line losses, etc., that one suffers, especially when one is talking about mega scale power transfer of the order of 200 megawatt or more. The world is more or less converging on HVDC as the standard form of electricity transmission from the offshore to onshore. Obviously, once you reach onshore, you have to convert the DC electricity back into AC and then send it forward. So this is in net sum kind of a schematic of how an offshore wind plant can be mounted. Next slide, please. This slide gives some statistics of the growth momentum that wind energy has taken up over the last many years, I should say a decade and a half. No prizes for guessing that most of it is being driven by the fact that the world has finally come to the realization that something needs to be done about the increase in carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. And therefore, no surprises that we are seeing a breakneck pace of wind turbine or wind energy installation development, both onshore and offshore. If you look at the year 2020, for example, the world in net added 90 gigawatts of new power capacity, wind power capacity at the aggregate level. And this was a 53% increase over 2019. As at 2020, the world has a total of 743 gigawatts of capacity that is installed already, of which offshore only accounts for 35 gigawatt. And I think that is where, therefore, there is a lot of potential that still needs to be excavated and explored and taken to fruition. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is a slide that gives you the statistic of what's happening specifically with offshore wind. So in the year 2020, we saw 6.1 gigawatts of new offshore wind installations. I must hasten to mention here that almost all of it, exclusively, almost all of it was fixed foundation offshore wind energy installation that happened in 2020. I must say that floating wind, which we believe has a very high potential, is still a fledgling industry. It's still a fledgling technology, and I'll be speaking about it in brief in the future slides as to why it is the way it is and what could be a possible growth trajectory for offshore floating wind as we go forward. Next slide, please. This is the forecast for offshore wind. And no surprises again that we are expecting a breakneck pace of development from 2020 all the way to 2025. If you see the CAGR, it's almost 30% year on year. And thereafter, the idea is, or the estimation is, that it's going to grow at about 13% from then on. But I believe that the estimators here probably could be are probably being a little pessimistic. I think the breakneck pace of offshore wind installations, I think it's going to only increase past 2025, not least because countries such as China will be throwing their gauntlet at the problem and going up in terms of the enhancement of their offshore footprint. We believe that, as I mentioned in the previous slide, floating offshore is still a developing story. We believe that the full commercialization of floating offshore wind would probably only be possible by 2020. But I think that shouldn't give us a reason to sort of sit down and allow the cows to come home. I think the opportunity is nigh, and we should start making the effort in the Indian context to start looking at ways of taking the offshore floating wind mainstream ASAP. Next slide, please. This is the evolutionary journey of the wind turbines. The first one came into picture in 1991 in the offshore context. It was a very small turbine with a diameter of just 35 meters. And if you compare with what is happening right now, some of you probably would have come to know that GE is already out with their Heliad X model, which has a diameter of 220 meters. And as you can see, the industry, which is basically concentrated among GE, Siemens, and Vestas, is going through a massive creative innovation and a massive amount of creative competition, with each of the three players wanting to best the other one as things go forward. And I think for people like ONGC, for organizations such as SP Oil and Gas, this is only good because the higher the or the bigger the size of the turbine, the better economies of scale one can potentially target, which in net sum is going to play a very important role in bringing the LCOE as low as possible as time goes by. Next slide, please. India is really not there, unfortunately, in the department of offshore wind right now. But we believe that there is a lot of potential. Amarnathji also mentioned that we have 7,600 kilometers of shoreline, and we have our island geographies, Andaman and Nicobar. So I think there is a lot of potential, but some concerted efforts need to take place from here on for us to truly realize our potential. Next slide, please. Yeah, please, if you could click, yeah. I'm very sorry, but what I was trying to show you on this slide was that what I was trying to show you in this slide was that in the Indian context, the government of India has identified two zones. I think there is some problem with the slide there. The first zone has been identified off the coast of Gujarat, and the second potential area is off the coast of Tamil Nadu. And the wind speeds, the quality of wind speed that we see there, 7.52 meters per second, is fantastic. And I'm very sure that as we start exploring further offshore, the quality is only going to improve. Next slide, please. Next. In the floating context, various designs are being worked out, being bandied around, I should say, of which the three designs that you see on the table on the screen here, the Spar Buoy, Spar Submersible, and Tension Leg Platform, these are the three designs that have had some traction in the various pilot projects that have been mounted across the globe. We ourselves are very keen on developing the submersible design. We participated in an RFI with Shell for South Korea a few months back. And Shell is planning to develop a 400 megawatt offshore floating wind project there in South Korea. And I believe that for that project, they ultimately are going to go in for a variation of semi-submersible hull kind of design. Next slide, please. Now, I want to talk briefly about the cost side of things. Without a doubt, the single biggest challenge that we have in commercialization of offshore wind as a business and as an industry is the significant upfront capex commitment that one has to make. Now, if you look at the numbers for 2020, the world has finally been able to come to a number of $3.7 million per megawatt of offshore fixed wind installation. But if you look at a floating wind farm, we still are at in the vicinity of 5.8 to $6 million per megawatt. But even if you see the projections going out to 2024 to 2026, you would realize that while an attempt has been made to force fit the trend in terms of the lowering prices per megawatt or cost per megawatt for the wind installations, the fact of the matter is that the cost does significantly vary from one place or one location to the other, depending upon characteristics such as the depth of water, the availability of local manufacturing capacity, the availability of installation vessels, and so on and so forth. So this is one of the quirks of offshore wind development, that you will probably never be able to say with a lot of surety as to what could be your what could be a proper per megawatt cost for you, unless you first answer the questions about the location and the availability of the value chain and supply chain, etc. I still believe that it's going to be another 4 or 5 years before we can start getting clarity as to the long-term trend on where we are going with it in the Indian context. But I do not think we have the time to wait and ponder over that. I think the action in the meantime has to begin, and I believe that the government, in this case, will certainly have to play an important role in making this industry viable, at least in the formative years, before the industry gains ground and moves forward on its own. Next slide, please. I think what I'll do is I'll probably make this. If you could go back. Yeah, I would probably make this my last slide because I can see that I am probably overshooting my time. A lot of the people in the audience will probably be interested in knowing as to what exactly is the LCOE that people have been able to clock, at least at this point in time. So the numbers that I am able to share right now is that the decline has been seen in the LCOE, and today people are talking about $95 per megawatt hour, which translates to about 7.125 rupees per kilowatt hour in the Indian context, at 75 rupees to a dollar. But like I said, there is a range here. It is varying from 5.85 rupees to 9.375 rupees. And this is for fixed foundation offshore wind. If you look at the numbers correspondingly for floating, then they are in the vicinity of 12 to 14 rupees per kilowatt hour. Clearly, we still have some way to go before, we can start talking about grid parity and so on and so forth. But in the context of, and this is, like I mentioned, this is going to be my last slide. So in conclusion, what I believe is that organizations such as ONGC, the National Oil Company of India, they have a very important role to play in terms of creating the grounds for the establishment of certain pilot plants, which can lead to some utility scale developments and help to prove the concept in the Indian context, and also act as change agents, or let's say the nudge agents for the creation of local supply chains to be able to serve this industry. Because clearly the time for this industry has come, and now it is up to the powers that be and the entrepreneurs in India to take the bull by the horns and to take the matter forward. So at this stage, I will stop my talk. If anybody has any questions, I'll be more than happy to take it. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this fantastic program today. Thank you.